Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. It's hot as balls out and I like to keep my workouts at home, but since I don't want to disturb the folks in the household, I like to wear my Raycons like they're everyday earbuds while doing my yoga stretches. They're not only really comfortable to wear thanks to their optimized gel tips fitting whatever shape your ears take, their great fit also ensures they ain't falling off your ears anytime soon. Alright, fine, I'll do the shake test. Why? Anyway, they last over 8 hours of playtime, have 32-hour total battery life thanks to the rechargeable carrying case, and start at about half the price of other premium audio brands, rocking over 50,000 5-star reviews on their site. I'm also a fan of the ability to switch between noise isolation and awareness mode with just a simple toggle on the earbud. Now it's really easy to lose myself in some tunes or just keep enough awareness to hear my smoke detector go off because God forbid I wanted to make toast this morning. And Raycon as always is offering all my viewers a great deal, so click the link in the description below or go to buyraycon.com/somecallmejohnny to save 15% off your next Raycon purchase. It really does help support this channel, so thank you as always for making all of this possible. Now let's continue on with the show. Now you want to talk about something that's been a long time coming. I'm finally tackling one of the 3 major platformers of the PlayStation 2 era. Of course, if there's other games that I'm forgetting, I am all ears to let me know about that sort of shit, but like growing up on the subject of action-packed platformers, more than likely you were either talking Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, or Ratchet and Clank. Given the immense popularity and success of the PlayStation 2, these games were always front and center on gaming magazines or commercials. Sure enough, despite never really playing these games for myself, I was more than aware of them because I saw them on TV all the damn time. And the commercials alone was almost reason enough for me to give Ratchet and Clank a shot because I thought all those weapon demonstration ads were genuinely hilarious.
Today we're gonna test a tractor beam from Ratchet and Clank going commando. Oh, nice, dude. Nice job, nice job.
But given my nature as a jobless high school student, one that was already content with the games they already had, not to mention my interest in these kind of games already kind of waning by the mid-2000s as I've alluded to before, I completely missed these games at their peak, and it's only now where I'm finally deciding to deal with that. Though to be technical, I have sampled all of these games at some point in the last couple of years for either Brain Scratch or SGB, but that was just to get a sense of how the games function so that I could provide a better commentary. I didn't finish any of them because I was playing other things, and I knew at some point I was going to tackle these games properly on my channel anyway. We're starting with Ratchet and Clank for a couple of reasons. Besides the commercials, out of the 3 platformers of this era, it was the one that looked the most interesting to me, the one that I thought, out of those 3 given, I would enjoy the most. Jak and Daxter had the Naughty Dog prestige, and I was a big Crash Bandicoot fan, sure, but Jak and Daxter didn't grab my attention in a similar manner. And Sly Cooper, I'll be honest, just slipped under my radar completely. It was the one I heard the least amount of, despite that game leaving its own mark on the console. Secondly, out of those 3, Ratchet and Clank was the one you guys wanted me to look at first and foremost, and I know Spyro fans might be feeling a little gypped at this point because the original creators of Ratchet and Clank was Insomniac Games, the same creators as Spyro the Dragon. And I know for some it might be weird that I'm heading into Insomniac Games' like second foray into the platforming scene without having any of the Spyro baggage, you could say, but I don't think that'd be really relevant when discussing the Ratchet and Clank series, and I'll try to be nice here. I'm sorry, but I've gotten a lot more requests for Ratchet and Clank than I have ever gotten for Spyro, and I am really sorry, just kind of like rubbing salt in the wound. I've always had more of an interest in Ratchet and Clank than I have for Spyro the Dragon. I honest to God gave Spyro a shot when it was first released. I played the first game, I thought it was fine, it was okay, but it wasn't enough to make me interested in future games with my attention span back then. If it didn't leave a lasting impression, I was quickly moving on to other things. All I can say is that Spyro will get his moment in the sun. That's only a matter of time, really. It's just not now. But these are always some of my favorite videos to create because I'm a total newbie here, so as always I'm excited to see the journey and me reflecting on my experiences as I go through Ratchet and Clank's library. Not all of them, of course, I gotta keep you guys coming back somehow, but a good chunk of them for this marathon. In fact, the 4 main PS2 games will be the priority for this marathon and schedule pending. I may include the PSP games as well. I'm also going to be sticking with the original PlayStation 2 versions of these games and not use the HD collection, since I feel that since I'm finally going to tackle these games I've ignored for so long, I'm going to play them as originally released, and take myself back to the early to mid 2000s. So let's dive into Insomniac Games' second foray with the original Ratchet and Clank. Which is kind of funny to say out loud, isn't it? Because as I'm sure some of you know, though I'm going to assume you don't, otherwise what's the point of me even saying this shit? Ratchet and Clank was not what Insomniac Games had in mind when making their PlayStation 2 debut. They probably figured with their success of Spyro the Dragon with that being handed off to other developers, Insomniac wanted to try their hand at other genres, going as far as making concepts that didn't really go anywhere, even making a prototype of a game that was inspired by Zelda and Tomb Raider called Girl with a Stick, which I'm sure was a working title, but major props if that's what they were going to stick with in final production. Alas, this game would be scrapped, as outside of Insomniac Games founder Ted Price, the devs were not very passionate about the game's project, citing it as one-dimensional, and Sony, believing it wouldn't find a proper market in the current environment, recommended Insomniac Games to stick to their strengths. In early 2001, development of the first Ratchet & Clank would begin, based on a space adventure concept penned by Brian Hastings, one of the earliest members of Insomniac Games, drawing inspiration from Japanese manga Spyro and Conker's Bad Fur Day. But to get a working demo out in time for presentation and funding, Insomniac would receive assistance from Naughty Dog. Yeah, when I finished the game and saw Naughty Dog listed in the special thanks, I was sort of taken aback. Okay then, not what I was expecting. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Insomniac and Naughty Dog shared the same office building, and while they acted as compatriots during the Crash and Spyro days, during the PS2 era, the two studios would sort of work together, sharing developmental notes and such, with Mark Cerny acting as a conduit between the two studios, having helped both teams with Crash and Spyro respectively in the earlier days. It was so interesting to learn because earlier you can convince me that these two studios were like rivals to each other, like playful rivals at the very least, because I recall when Crash 3 had that Spyro the Dragon demo built into it, and I don't think they do that unless they were like true rivals against each other, but no, it turns out they were total chums and they helped each other along in the process, which clearly worked given where the studios are nowadays. And I wonder, even after like 20 some odd years, if that sense of camaraderie is still there, and if so, when are we getting that Last of Us crossover with Spider-Man, and how long before that game gets remade? And so, after a few hurdles here and there, Insomniac would release Ratchet & Clank for the 2002 holiday season, where it was clearly a critical success with the number of games released after this is any indication, not to mention they got a full feature-length movie, but we'll get to those eventually. How does this game stack up now? Our journey begins on planet Veldin, where we see our main protagonist Ratchet tuning up his spaceship. Okay then, but enough about that. We then jump to a factory on a nearby planet where we're introduced to our second protagonist, a diminutive robotic defect that, after learning a horrible truth, is quickly hounded by security, forcing him to make a hasty retreat, crash landing near Ratchet's home back on Veldin. After managing to retrieve the robot from harm, he informs Ratchet about the evil scheme of Executive Chairman Drek, a comically evil and over-the-top business tycoon that, after polluting his own planet to the point of destruction, is planning on making a new home for his race by taking pieces of other planets and making a new planet with that, consequently dooming the other planets to extinction. Though Ratchet feels he can't do much from his position, the robot believes that Captain Quark, the beloved superhero/celebrity of this galaxy, might be able to help, but he needs Ratchet's assistance to reach him, and with the robot being able to jumpstart Ratchet's ship, Ratchet agrees to tag along and even ends up calling the robot Clank, since his original name—
My serial number is V54296.
Oops. Yeah, fuck that. And thus the journey of Ratchet and Clank begins as the two travel across many different planets that I honestly couldn't be asked to remember fully, seeing as you're planet hopping quite a bit through this adventure, both to places unknown and previously visited areas once you have the means to fully explore them, collecting these info bots that point the heroes to the next victim of Drek's schemes. Eventually, the two will finally meet Captain Quark, who you find out is not quite the hero Clank hoped he would be, as the washed-up superhero is actually in the back pocket of Drek, trying to reclaim his mantle of fame, but the dude is not very good at his job, and fails multiple times in eliminating our heroes before he's put out of commission for good, though I get the feeling this isn't the last we'll see of him. You'll be meeting a hefty number of characters along the way too, most of them being momentary one-offs that provide a singular purpose and then fuck off for the rest of the game, like Quark's personal trainer with this skateboarder named Skid McMarks. Like, even as a gag, why would you name yourself after a shit stain? I have to wonder who lost what bet. But though these folks aren't on screen for very long, they all provide some pretty funny dialogue. I didn't bust a gut at any of these gags, but I did crack a smile constantly. With Captain Quark, I feel delivering some of the best lines. Shit, one of my favorite bits with him isn't even a line, it's his reaction to one of his corny rhymes.
So if you're fighting crime, or just fighting grime, come to
That's such a small, momentary thing, but that made me legit crack up. And Chairman Drek is one of those villains you love to hate, a corrupt business tycoon that only has one thing on the mind: cash, and is willing to endanger countless lives in the galaxy to get more of it, as all business tycoons would likely want to do. I'm serious, give Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk another decade, mark my words. Though in Drek's case, it helps that his character is pretty entertaining thanks to him being voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who I think anyone who's watched any form of animated media in the past 20 years can immediately recognize.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Cut!
And if you don't like it, you can take your whiny, sniveling, snot-nosed populations, form a line behind me, and kiss my— We're still on? Well, turn it off, you idiot!
He's not as goofy as, say, Dr. Neocortex, but I think the evil businessman inherently has a more sinister aura than the standard mad scientist, especially as you get older in life, so I'd say Drek still delivers the goods. The story is relatively straightforward and simplistic, but the characters and the dynamic they share make up for it, and animation-wise, this shit is great. They had plenty of experience beforehand, but Insomniac made one hell of a first impression on the PS2 with character animations and expressiveness, really the whole shebang. Environments look great, I witnessed very little in graphical pop-up. I only saw a bit of slowdown here and there when things got hectic in combat, which I was already kind of expecting, so that's fine. Characters make great use of squash and stretch, the voice acting is good, as well as the lip syncing. The only real downside is Ratchet. His facial expressions get a little weird looking. It's the only thing I would call rough around the edges, but the expressiveness is still there to help sell the character. Now, is it all good? No. Ratchet and Clank's developing relationship is a major focus, and at first Ratchet just kind of views Clank as a means to an end, right? Like, Clank wants Ratchet to help him stop Drek and his plans because it's the right thing to do, while Ratchet just repeatedly wants to make detours to get some personal gain out of this journey, putting him at odds with Clank on the occasion. Though it's mostly harmless shit, like he just wants a new hoverboard, he wants a new oxygen mask, one priority over the other, but Ratchet can also be quite the asshole to Clank, sometimes a little too much, which makes Ratchet borderline unlikable. You've likely seen this writing trope plenty of times in your life, the two characters at odds until they find common purpose and make up, but I do think they sort of overdid it with Ratchet, where even after he witnesses Drek's plans in motion and gains some perspective, and after learning that his home planet is next up on the chopping block, I don't quite buy that Ratchet has become fully selfless. There just happens to be a personal stake in the matter now, and Ratchet can't afford to be such a dick at this time. Though I ended up liking Clank more than Ratchet, as I'm sure was the intent, I still liked Ratchet enough to want to learn more about this dude in future games, because in this game, we don't know much about him. And while there is appeal in that mystery, this does lead to problems in this story, since because we don't know much of him or his upbringing, his nonchalant attitude and him being such a jerk to Clank lacks complete justification. I mean, if we're just going off of Clank's actions in this game alone, then yeah, Ratchet has the right to be upset with their current predicament, but not to this extreme given the game's whimsical tone, and I think if just a little more time was spent on Ratchet, we could have gotten a better perspective, and maybe fully understand why he came off as this hot-headed douche. And maybe I'm alone in this part, but it's a thought that kept creeping into my head. But for a character named Ratchet, one whose main weapon is a large wrench, a character that we're introduced to with him tinkering with a spaceship, I find it very odd that he doesn't do much mechanical shit. He wields a lot of guns, and by God, he knows how to use them, but every time upgrades are involved for him or Clank, you're usually getting them from these scientists or other guys that supply Ratchet and Clank with the upgrades, and I think it would have made more sense if Ratchet did some of that shit himself. I can only recall one time where he did some sort of mechanical work, and that was just a basic ass Fonzarelli fix, which shit, I can do that. And then there was the endgame where Ratchet takes Clank back home to fix his damaged arm. That's it, I think, though. And I'm aware this isn't that big of a deal. I just find it odd that the supposed mechanic of the game doesn't really do anything with his namesake, but maybe that's something future games will fix. That remains to be seen. Please don't spoil that in the comments. But to get back to the plot, after Ratchet and Clank have their reconciliation, they team up to finally put an end to Ultimate Supreme Executive Chairman Drek, his title not mine, and stop his schemes for good, wiping out his makeshift planet with the very weapon he was planning to use himself, the Duplanetizer. The galaxy is saved with Ratchet and Clank chilling out on the couch and watching Core continue to sell out. Hey, we all got bills to pay, I sure as shit ain't judging by Raycons. And I want to be clear, the reason why I'm even giving these characters and plot this much thought is because I think Insomniac wanted to make something a little more delicate or interesting than your standard ABC platformer story, though Ratchet and Clank is still Saturday morning cartoon levels. But there's still enough here to make these characters memorable, make you interested in how their plot points resolve. I think it worked. This is clearly not the end point for some of these characters. It's almost as if they made this game knowing full well that sequels are sure to follow, but the story still works on its own merits. And the game itself, man, I can't believe that this game, released in 2002, is a much better Shadow the Hedgehog than the actual Shadow the Hedgehog released in 2005. Good fucking lord. I mean, this game ain't perfect, I got shit to complain about, but I can safely say that this right here is a good game, and honestly, one I wish I played earlier in my youth. In this game, you're jumping across different planets and orbital bases, completing the current objective given to you. It's straightforward stuff where you just have to tackle the challenge ahead. It could be time challenges on hoverboards or completing obstacle courses to prove yourself worthy of an upgrade. A lot of progression involves getting a certain item in one place and then using it to fully explore another place you previously visited. In a platformer sense, I like to think of it as every planet having multiple acts. There's always something to nab on your first visit, but when you come back with the proper item or upgrade, there's a whole new section of the planet that opens up that offers a completely different obstacle that itself rewards you with another mandatory item or something optional but beneficial, like a tool that lets you grab money from afar or a permanent upgrade to your health. I like the kind of platformers that also like take Metroidvania elements and like nicely implement them into the core design. Regarding the kind of things you end up doing in this adventure, I ended up liking most of it. I thought there was little in like bullshit, like suddenly needing to learn a completely different gameplay style or going against the conventions the game sets up earlier. And don't get me wrong, this game has swimming sections, it has bits where you're on a turret shooting things out of the sky, and times where you're even on a battleship, hunting down your next target right out of a Star Fox game. But not only are these in line with the aesthetic of the game, they also control remarkably well. Yeah, I even like the handful of sections when you're in control of Clank. He can't do nearly as much as Ratchet, no weapons, no hardcore platforming outside of basic jumps, but his emphasis on puzzles and minion collecting I thought was a nice change of pace that again wasn't too long to start, and immensely satisfying when I'm able to sick my goons against the things that were giving me shit earlier. And then later when you're able to upgrade Clank in these fun kaiju sections, I thought that was a great logical evolution of his earlier gameplay that also works as a great payoff in feeling so limited earlier. Now does this all get a little repetitive after a bit? Most definitely. But I found that no singular area lasted more than 15-20 minutes, sometimes not even that much, so even though some areas require multiple visits, the new challenges offered and the short run length means you're not overstaying your welcome. Overall, I thought this game had a nice brisk pace with the perfect length. Whenever the game informed me that I needed a certain item for the next section and then later finding it, the most primal part of my brain started making monkey noises because it means, hey, I can finish off what I started in the previous world. It was even better when my knack for exploration awarded me with things like an item that reduced shop prices, or the ability to summon these ruthless flying drones that were rare, yeah, but they took care of enemies better than I could ever hope to. My gripes are more on the technical and fundamental aspects of the game's design. This game starves you for checkpoints. Now, you don't have lives in Ratchet and Clank, and I do admire that progressiveness, especially for a title released in 2002. But in some of these areas, man, the distance you are sent back when you die is so fucking vast that it did get a bit draining. Though to somewhat circumvent this, there are these shortcuts that you open up as you explore the level so you don't have to travel as much when you have to revisit, and I like that. But I think every level could have used at least 2 or 3 more checkpoints, especially since enemies respawn whenever you die, and some are not very fun to combat on repeated visits, like these alien snappers or these crab fuckers. Any small, nimble enemy that required more than one hit was also a big pain in my testicles. Though it's called Ratchet and Clank, it's Ratchet who does most of the heavy lifting, being able to knock around things with this massive wrench, which he can also toss like a boomerang for safe, long-range combat, or break wooden boxes and TNT crates with ease. I know Naughty Dog helped with development, but dipping your hands a little too deep into that Crash Bandicoot juice there, Insomniac. But this being a 3D action platformer, jumping on shit is also part of the equation, as in doing things like wall jumping up certain surfaces and what have you. Ratchet's a little heavy on the turning and the default camera speed was a little too slow, though thankfully the game gives me the option to speed it up. But other than those snags, I found Ratchet's controls to be smooth and responsive. I like his little double flip jump, I love the long jump Clank gives him later, which later evolves into a rocket jump, and the hover ability is just the icing on the cake. Quintessential 3D platforming abilities, I love to see it. And you can grind on certain rails to reach your next destination or collect some extra bolts, which act as this game's currency that you can use in these Gadgetron shops to purchase the real bread and butter of combat, guns, and lots of them. The game has a vast collection of weapons and tools at your disposal, and though yes, some are clearly better options than others, I didn't find much use for the suck cannon outside of getting out of reach bolts, which became obsolete later on, and the less I say about the walloper the better, and the taunter was only good for attracting some goons in very specific circumstances. I was still surprised to see that a number of other weapons still had their use even late into the game. Like, I know the flamethrower gets dunked on a bit unless you're playing like the PAL version of the game, but for crowd control against like smaller enemies, I couldn't think of a better option. And the blaster gun, like that machine gun you get in the beginning of the game, that still had a lot of uses. God, I love the drones, both the ones that act as a shield and take hits for you, and the little devils that scatter across the ground and blow shit up on contact. Saved my ass a bunch of times. And ammo was never an issue because there's plenty of these crates scattered about that contain healthy amounts of the stuff, and you can even purchase ammo of any weapon you own in one of the many Gadgetron vendors. You can pause the game and equip weapons manually, but you can also make use of the quick select so that you can swap weapons on the fly, but this isn't perfect. You have to hold down the triangle button and then use the analog stick or D-pad to select the slot you want and then make the switch. I really wish I could just tap a direction on the D-pad to make the switch, which isn't a thing in this game because strangely, this PlayStation 2 game where the DualShock controller was already an established thing since the late 90s still has the D-pad as an option for movement. Why? This makes zero sense to me. It should have been a dedicated hotkey for weapon swapping. You know what? The shoulder buttons too. R1 and R2 do the same thing. L1 and L2 do the same thing. I personally would have had like the L1 and R1 buttons as weapon swaps like in a Mega Man title. I know, that's just me. I realize that may not be everyone's cup of tea. I'm just not big on having multiple buttons sharing one action. There's no manual lock on either, which for some weapons, some weapons are equipped with an auto lock, but it's proximity based, and I didn't like that shit in Shadow the Hedgehog. I sure as shit don't like it here. Look at all these bullets just fucking whiffing. Some weapons have a homing function to save you the trouble, but a manual lock on would have been ideal to help mitigate the pain. Some tools also didn't need to be separate weapons, and I'm mainly talking about the story important upgrades. The swing shot to cross large gaps, which itself is great to use, the trespasser to unlock certain doors that involve you playing this laser minigame, the hydro displacer, which lets you transfer a large body of water from one area to another to access different altitudes. These are fine, they work as function, but you have to manually equip these tools every time they're needed, and since you only really need these tools for these moments, it would have made more sense if they were context-sensitive prompts. Like when I get to a trespasser section, just give me a prompt to take me to the minigame. When I get to a swing shot area, just give me a button to press so I can swing away. Keep things snappy, you know what I mean? These bit moments ended up making progression a little rocky because it happened pretty often. Do yourself a favor and collect as many bolts as you can when you can as well, because this game also likes to lock progression through money gates. The bolts you collect are not just for weapons and ammo, they're also needed for plot important items, and the game will just lock them behind paywalls. Now, given my playstyle where I explore every little bit that I can when possible, I never found myself short on cash and I always had more than enough to proceed. But I still don't like the idea of the paywall, especially in a platformer. Like, imagine playing a Crash Bandicoot game that locked progression because you didn't collect enough Wumpa Fruit or boxes or worse, gems. No, that'd be some dumb shit. But this game wants you to collect all those bolts, so make sure you do, otherwise you gotta grind, or worse, actually use something like that metal detector and waste time looking for loose change on the ground, completely breaking the pace. Or I don't know, Ratchet was a dick to Clank, so maybe he had this coming, the prick. Every world also has these gold bolts that, as far as I'm aware, are totally optional and are only needed to unlock these special gold weapons that act as souped up versions of previous guns. I ended up not getting any of these because I think I only found about 5 gold bolts total in my playthrough, and the price for some of these guns were through the roof, my god. However, it should be noted that Ratchet and Clank is meant to be played multiple times, as it does have a New Game Plus feature that lets you keep your weapons and bolts previously collected, so that you can eventually unlock those ridiculously overpowered guns like the gold weapons or even the Rhino, which stands for Rip Ya a New One, which I just love. And this gun fucking rocks as well. I couldn't help myself. I ended up doing a glitch that lets me go out of bounds and get to a spot to let me farm infinite bolts because I wanted to try this weapon out. It costs 150,000 bolts, which you're just not getting on your first playthrough by normal means. And this grinding method right here, fuck, this shit takes a while, so I ended up placing some tape on the controller and putting a weight on the circle button while I did other things around the house like Final Fantasy XIV roulettes and watching Black Lagoon. You don't need the Rhino for what it's worth. You can get something like the Tesla Claw later that's also pretty expensive even after getting the discount, but it's like a Ghostbusters Proton pack. It's so useful late game and against the final boss. Also just realized I made an Elon Musk comment earlier and there's a weapon in this game called the Tesla Claw. Ooh. And the utility you can rock with other weapons make you more than capable for any challenge thrown at you. Sometimes even your basic wrench is more than handy. But come on, a weapon like the Rhino, everyone's gotta experience it at least once, and it's ridiculous. Completely neuters any challenge the game might have had. But you know what? That was my favorite thing about the Chicago typewriter in Resident Evil 4, or any game that has overpowered weapons or infinite ammo. Sometimes there's just fun to be had in blowing shit up, which Ratchet and Clank has you do a lot. Indeed, stuff like this gives Ratchet and Clank a good amount of replayability, especially if you're all about that completionist mentality. Collect all those bolts, unlock every weapon, get the gold stuff, get the Rhino, maybe even go for those hidden skill points that require you to do certain things under incredibly strict circumstances. I managed to get about 4 by complete accident, but it's something else to hunt for if you want more playtime. Maybe one day I'll do it for myself, but for my initial playthrough for this review, I didn't think it was necessary. A basic playthrough was more than enough to make me a fan. This was a good time. Obviously, I can't compare it to the other games because I haven't played them yet, but if the first game is anything to go by, things are looking promising, so I'm gonna give this a recommend. Play it on the HD collection, save yourself a couple of bucks. I got my issues as I went into, but I am very curious to see if future games will fix any of them. Where does this series peak? How long before we reach the embarrassing midlife crisis? All this and more next time when we continue the Ratchet and Clank marathon with Ratchet and Clank Balls Out, going commando. As always, thank you all for watching. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask if you decide to go outside, get vaccinated if it's possible, give the video a like, hit subscribe for more, ring that bell, fucking hell.